Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Hope you're having a great week so far. We are just working on getting everybody into the meeting who wants to be here. So thank you for joining us. This is an event sponsored by the College Advisory Committee. Tina Cusack, my wonderful friend and comrade in this endeavor, is here as well. With me, we are both BCC parents. My name is Molly Chiak, and I have an 11th grader at BCC and an 8th grader coming up. And Tina has a senior and a 10th grader. So she's in the thick of it. And we are joined this evening by Nancy Edwards, who is an area educational consultant, private college counselor. She has had the joy of going through BCC with her 2 children and sending them off to illustrious colleges. So she knows the process well. And she is our expert this evening. And so she got us into this volunteering gig. And she was a rep for a long time on the PTA and just a stalwart member of the BCC community. So big loss for us, but we're lucky to get her back tonight. So we encourage everyone to use the chat robustly this evening. And I'm just pulling that up so I can keep track of it. And again, this event is intended to be targeted for all ages. We're all thinking as the parents of high schoolers, am I doing the right thing at the right moment? I don't want to drop the ball. So this event is really intended to be an overview for the rest of our events this year, which hopefully you're keeping an eye out for our emails, where you can see all of our free virtual events this year. Virtual except for the mock testing, which I feel like we need to start pointing out. That's coming up. We'll do a mock ACT in November and a mock SAT in December. So please keep your eye on the BCC Net listserv for announcements about all of our events. So we're going to get started, and we will be giving you an overview of what to do when throughout high school. And again, I encourage you to use the chat, use the raise hand function in Zoom, make yourself known somehow, because we really do want these events to be interactive and helpful to all of our audience members. So like I said, what we hope to do is to present a timeline overview every year, every season in high school, what you should be doing. And the Q&A can be running throughout, and then we'll certainly leave time at the end to make questions for Nancy, who has worked with countless students applying to different schools, all getting into attending a school that is right for them. So we're going to kick it off with 9th grade. One of our missions as a committee is to really bring the temperature down, particularly in this area around this process. And so we're loath to even recommend too many things to do in 9th grade, but there are things that you can be doing. We hear from college counselors all the time how important it is in 9th grade to continue to develop your reading skills. Side note, I teach first-year students at Georgetown, and they've obviously gotten into Georgetown, but this can never go wrong. To become a better reader will serve your children well, no matter what they're doing. So that's a really great thing to focus on in 9th grade. And it doesn't matter what they read, just read. Read as much as you can. Have a standard schedule, but just read so that you can develop that fluency, develop the habit of reading as lifelong learning, and it will serve you well in testing and also college level reading, of course.
Right, and also I will say that a lot of schools are asking for people to put forward their favorite book, list of books, and I have so many kids, it's a struggle for them to tell me 10 books that they want to talk about. And so it can be nonfiction, science fiction, magazines. It doesn't have to be, you know, deep literature. Reading is just so critically important.
Great. We have talked to folks before about this is a great time to consider what you're interested in, take electives that might sound interesting, explore some clubs or outside activities. But this is a chance to really start honing in on what you're interested in so that you can start to build that trajectory of interests and your personality and where your strengths and your interests and your passions lie. And like it says here, where are you going to invest your time? So this is a real discovery phase, but a productive discovery phase. I will find the link, but I wanted to put a plug in. I wouldn't say this is blow me away financial thing, but I did listen this morning to the latest episode of Ask Lisa. I highly recommend this podcast. It's the psychology of parenting. They had a guest on talking about how to pay for college this morning, and it was quite good. And this is the time where you can start thinking about financial planning and how you are going to afford college. If you haven't started a 529, I was definitely convinced that it is worth it after all. Really just start getting your head around how you're going to finance this, how you can encourage your child to start thinking about what this will look like, and managing everyone's expectations around loans and contribution. And again, I'll recommend the podcast Ask Lisa's episode this morning. They had a guest on, Ron Lieber, who has a book out called The Price of College. Really interesting episode this morning. Nancy, anything else we should be thinking about in 9th grade that we've missed here?
No, it's just have a plan, right? I think that sometimes people, they think, oh, if we start telling kids about college in 9th grade, it's going to make it more stressful. In my experience, it makes it less stressful because they kind of know, like, okay, I have to build to something, right? Like see what you like about clubs and try to think about things that you might want to have leadership for, right? Like, and some of them you don't want to, and that's fine too. But you start to kind of plan. And once you have a plan, I think things just seem just much more simple to kids.
Wonderful. All right. That's our only slide on 9th grade. Think about reading, think about financial planning, think about what you're interested in, and do well in school. Keep your grades up, right? 10th grade is start to think about your resume. And this is where you have figured out what you're interested in. Maybe you're continuing your long career in travel soccer, but also maybe you've been horseback riding for a long time, or maybe you've been babysitting since you were in 8th grade, and that's been a steady gig. There are all kinds of ways to think about this. And so we have a great event coming up this Thursday with a few other college counselors who can help us think about resume building is what it's called, but it's not necessarily building the resume. It's really about narrating your experience and thinking about all the things that kids do and how to frame them in a way that makes sense for the college application, so that it shows the qualities that really shine forth in your student, whether it's discipline and dedication or it's consistency and reliability. There are different ways to think about these activities. And so 10th grade is the time where you can make a list. And even if you feel like there's nothing there, it's a good exercise. I don't know, Nancy, as someone who coaches people through this all the time, do you have any thoughts on this piece?
Well, part of it is also things that I think sometimes people, because when some of us parents were in school, the idea that you had a job or you took care of people in the family was not considered as being very important. In today's environment, those are absolutely things that you need to keep track of. And how you spend your time outside of the classroom is what schools are looking for. So if you're responsible for your Nana, like, in fact, you know, you go with Nana on the bus to her doctor's appointments, you do various things. That's pretty important. And you need to know that that is important for schools and to put that forward in your resume.
Molly, I would add one other thing. I think also adding on, I think about any honors you've received. It could be as simple as a paper plate award that you received as a CIT at your camp. Maybe you were voted the most responsible CIT or the most compassionate, or maybe you were chosen to be the first seat in the concert, in the winter concert at school, the first violinist. So think about those things too, and they will help identify pieces of your character that you might think about furthering to develop, and themes for college essays, when and what type of schools you might be considering based on those little things that really don't seem significant, can just be a nugget that helps grow and build on as you're thinking about how you want to present yourself in your applications a year or 2 years down the road.
That is really good advice, Tina. Thanks. I'm just going to repeat what you said because your audio for me is a little wonky. I don't know, Nancy, if you could hear Tina as well. You could hear her fine?
Yes.
Oh, okay, it must be my computer. But I love that advice about the smallest thing down to the paper plate award your kid won at camp some year, or in a particular volunteer group. Thank you for that. So, and then the next thing is think about how you're going to prepare for the process. Really start to get your mind around it. What kinds of tests might be useful. And this is where I'll make a plug for our mock testing in November and December. Your 10th grader can take the ACT and SAT for free. We offer this, we partner with college prep vendors who come and help us run these mock tests. And those can really give your student a sense of what the timing is like, what test feels better, and then to start thinking about how they might want to supplement their preparation. Are they a kind of person who can make use of Khan Academy to its full effect? There's some really amazing functionality on Khan Academy. You can take your PSAT results, upload them to Khan Academy, and it will give you a customized list of how to prepare, or what questions to lean into, or what kinds of questions you need support with. So please do not underestimate some free resources. Some of the technology has really come a long way and is really helpful to students. But maybe your kid needs one-on-one help. Maybe they need one-on-one coaching in person. Maybe they're great with online classes, and that kind of group mentality is helpful, but that's something to get a sense of in 10th grade as well. Again, I'll throw it to Nancy and Tina if there's anything to add.
I would just say that the thing that CAC does, which is really great, you get feedback on, and you get the results of every question you got wrong. And so you really can look at it and see like, oh, clearly I didn't do well in this because I hadn't yet had those, I hadn't had trigonometry yet. So of course I missed all the trigonometry questions. And that can help you just be able to hone in and say, I need a tutor for this part, but for the rest of it, I think my kid can do that on their own. And I think that it's just a really great tool to help us kind of decide what we need to do and what we don't need to do for the prep work. And I know my kids went through immersion, so they were horrible on some things on English just because they never learned grammar. They didn't know. And they're like, we don't know how to, verbs, what are verbs? They just didn't know. But you know, you could say, okay, this is how we study for that, and could plan for it. And I think when the kids know, oh, this is the kind of question I need to figure out, they work on it, it makes it so much less stressful for them. And remember, these tests, one more thing, these tests that you take, no one knows about the scores. So there's absolutely no pressure on them, right? No school is ever going to see them, no scholarship committee, no one knows about it. So that is another really important aspect of it.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for
it's a-
mentioning that, Nancy. I think especially on the heels of getting all of these emails from the school about the PSAT that's being offered to 10th grade for free of charge, schools do not receive those scores. Is that right? Just confirming
Correct.
here.
I mean,
in 10th
there's a
grade.
score that's there. Schools receive it in this really strange, anonymous way, but yes, they don't know. So when your kid has the score, PSAT score in 10th grade, when the kid applies in 12th grade, the school doesn't match up and say, oh, that this was like the kid who had the 1060 and on his PSAT. They don't know that. It's not matched up that way.
Gotcha. So they receive it in some sort of aggregated form,
Correct.
but not attached to individual names. So that there's total freedom in 10th grade to really just get a feel for these tests and experiment.
Other thing that
Oh,
we hear an awful
go
lot
ahead.
about in the college advisory committee are lots of questions about test optional. And I think that taking advantage of these free, the mock SAT and the mock SAT and the PSAT at school will also help give you and your child some perspective on whether going test optional is the right route for them based on their experience in a non-pressure time to take these standardized tests and see how it feels. And so it's a good time to start thinking about, am I someone who wants to submit test scores? And if so, what's my path to get my best test score? Or am I a student who will present better without submitting test scores? So highly encourage your sophomores to be taking advantage of these opportunities.
Well, and also I will throw out there that we just don't know. I wish I could tell you for sure that the tests are over, but they're not. This year, MIT, for example, came back and said, we looked at it and we still feel that having a test gives us data that's very important to us. And they reinstated having a test. There are states that require students to have a test. Florida and Georgia, if you apply to state schools there, you have to have a test. So there's still places where a test is important, but in this situation, you can figure out whether or not it's worth it to you, whether you're going to Florida or Georgia is important enough for your kid to study and take those tests. It just gives you more data points.
Nancy, we got a question in the chat, which is a great, this always comes up, so I thank you for raising this. Someone has asked about how scores of mock PSATs for 10th graders are received by students and parents. So how do we know to prepare for the real test? I think this question is about the relationship between the PSAT and the SAT. Do you have a sense of how those might be related? Are the scores
So obviously, if you score well on the PSAT as a 10th grader, you think, oh, maybe I can do well in 11th and 12th grade. And again, it's you see what questions you got wrong, you learn where you can do better. And those are the things that you kind of try to look at in that realm. But we don't always know. Again, it's largely about the math, right? If your kid is advanced in math, largely they do better in 10th grade on the PSAT than if they're not. Because there a lot of the PSAT and the SAT is about math. It's about a level of math. So algebra 2 is, if you're at algebra 2, you do better.
Yep.
And so for a lot of kids, that means that they might have to get tutoring to get up that little piece of that they don't know.
Right. I hear you. I know that, so my son took the PSAT last year in 10th grade. I'm curious to see how his math score changes, having a whole year of math under his belt now that he's in 11th grade, and also becoming more familiar with testing in general. Those can all be big variables. Also, to the person who asked this question, my understanding is the PSAT is slightly shorter than the SAT, which is also something to think about because so much of test taking is time management. So that can be a good reason to take some mock SATs, the real length as well. So
absolutely, and the ACT, for example, is a much faster pace. It's 1 minute a question, so it's a much faster paced test than the SAT.
Right.
But some kids tend to like that because it makes them they don't ponder as much and they just answer and go.
Right. A couple more questions while we're on this slide, and while we're talking about
I know
tests.
testing is always big.
We do have a testing sidebar, so I'm wondering if we should skip ahead, and then I'm gonna lob you these questions once we get to our testing slide, if that's okay, Nancy.
Okay, sure.
All right, so at the beginning of junior year, all right, it's reality. We're thinking ahead. It's September. So this is a time to start thinking about prepping for standardized tests. Again, do you want to get your kid in an online class? Do you want to have them access the Khan Academy resources, maybe work with a tutor? There's so many resources in this area, and we share a great deal of them, great number of them at the end of this presentation, and we will share these slides. So they're free ones, there are fee-based ones, but now is the time to really put the foot on the pedal there. Again, the PSAT is, I think October, I'm gonna get the date wrong, October 12th, 17th, something, it's coming up. We've gotten a million emails and I still don't have the date right. It's offered for free at BCC for 10th graders. For 11th graders, there's a small fee. And again, this can be a qualifier for some level on the National Merit Scholarship Program. And it's generally just a good experience to get them into that testing, time management and mindset, where they're staying calm, they're just working through it, they're treating it like a puzzle, you know, just practicing can give them some kind of automaticity with the instructions. There's a lot of benefits to be had there. And now's the time to start learning more about colleges. You know, there's Supermatch College Search in Naviance, and we can talk a little bit about Naviance in a moment. And then there's also a website from the College Board that's quite interesting called Big Future. So if you Google Big Future College Board, you can put in all kinds of variables like size of school or your interests, private or public, and it will turn up a list of schools that you might want to explore based on that list. Nancy, do you want to add anything about those resources?
Oh, you're good.
Okay, great.
I'm good here.
So here's our testing sidebar. So again, we just wanted to, at a glance, give you a sense of, you know, the trajectory of testing. So in the 10th grade of fall, they have the opportunity to take these mock tests and they'll do the PSAT. 11th grades, where again, you really start to get serious, and they can again take the mock SAT and ACT to get practice and think about which test is best for them. We have an event that will help you think about the qualitative differences in those tests. As Nancy mentioned, the SAT is a really, is about pace. The ACT can tend to be, I'm not the expert here, but tends to be about connections and deeper questions that you need to spend more time with. I personally was a person who you would have thought two different people took those two different tests. So it's worthwhile to get to know which one suits you, shows off your strength better. In the 11th grade, you want to think about that standardized test prep, and then take the SAT. March 22nd is our BCC date for the SAT at school for 11th graders, but there are several dates offered. So you know, you might want to take it repeatedly. Your student might want to take it repeatedly. And then in the 11th grade summer, if that's something that hasn't gone well, or you want to try for that next raised score, that's really a great time to cap off the testing. I'll let Nancy jump in here on why that's wise. My experience, I taught high school for years. 12th grade fall is like, college applications are like a full-time job. So having all of this out of the way ahead of time can be really helpful. Nancy, do you want to
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Tina. No, okay. So I was going to say that there are multiple things here. One is that I know some of you may have heard of this term super score. Not every, a super score is when they take different sections from the test that you took and put them together to create a better score. Not every school, not every college accepts the super score, So sometimes it's, you can't just imagine that today I'm going to focus on English and do well on that, and the next test I'm going to focus on math and then see what happens. So that is something that you have to think about in your school list and the schools that you're looking at, whether they will accept that super score. I know a lot of people just imagine that they're going to get away with things, and they, were horrible in this one and better in the other one, and they're going to have a magic score. And sometimes that doesn't happen. So the taking it 1 to 3 times makes absolute sense to me. Generally, no more. The fourth time, you're not really going to get statistically much better, unless the difference was between 10th and the end of 11th grade, the beginning of 10th grade and the end of 11th grade. You might have a super jump there, but largely it's not, it doesn't help you in the process to continue to take it 4, 5, 6 times. I see there's a question.
Yeah, there's lots of questions here on testing, so I'm gonna lob some to you. But what I understand you saying about the super score is every time you take the test, do the best you can on all the sections, and some schools will allow you to combine the best of your efforts.
Correct.
Okay, great. So here's a question from Lyric. Do colleges expect test scores from students from this area of the country, even if they're optional? Is this optional kind of a illusory option?
And that is largely on the school. So what happens, of course, is the kids who score well will turn in a test score. So in this post-COVID time that we're in, they know that people were able to take tests here. So you should have a score. They imagine that every kid from BCC has a score. And sometimes, it looks like, oh, well, if you didn't turn in a score, 15 of your classmates turned in a score, your score must have been really bad. And sadly, that's how people look at things from this area. So you really do have to look at, so most schools, you will have a range of the 25 to 75th percentile. And if your child is in between the 50th and the 75th, largely we say they should submit the score. And I hope that made sense.
School, yeah. Is that regardless of school that they are applying to?
You mean?
Like if I'm applying to Princeton, but I'm also applying to
right. So yes, so for
Maryland.
And the thing about the Common App, the beauty of the Common App is that you can make a decision for each school you apply to. You don't have to be consistent. You can take your scores out for one school, put the scores in for another school. So the schools for which you are competitive with your test score, submit the test score. The schools that you're not, don't submit it. And sometimes I will say there's a spot in the Common App for additional information where you can say, my test scores aren't that good, but I don't think they represent who I am as a student. I think my commitment, my AP scores, you have a list of the things that you think represent your academic abilities, and you say that you should be judged on that, not your standardized test score. So there are ways in which you can manage those low test scores. There's some kids who just don't, and you say like, I just don't, I come into the room and I panic. Or 3 hours in one spot is just not, my brain doesn't work well with that. And so I don't do well. So there are ways to talk about your low test scores and put yourself in a better light. And that's what I always encourage my students to do. And sadly, your school is not the school that accepts that ideology. They are very, Georgetown is not our favorite in the test score realm. They want you to submit all test scores whenever you took them for whatever test. It doesn't matter. They are very, very strict on that. But it's one of the few schools that's really that bad.
So my understanding in the application, there's a part where it says, is there anything else you want us to know about your application? That's
correct. Additional information, correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think we had another question on elaboration on test optional. Do most colleges allow it, or does it depend on the school? Nancy, do you have a sense of statistics at this point?
At this point, it's a huge number is test optional. Now, are they truly test optional? That's another question, which is a little more complicated to answer. But for a large part, there's a very, like I said, there's Florida. So Florida, the state schools in Florida and Georgia require a test. Alabama requires a test, not at the time of admission, but at the time of matriculation. So for example, you can apply to University of Alabama and be accepted. By the time you say yes, you have to turn in a test score. So the test score is not necessarily determinant of you getting in, but you have to have one under the state legislature to be a part of the University of Alabama. And there's, I think, 3 other schools that absolutely require it. And other than that, all the schools are test optional. And so there's some schools which we didn't even talk about, like the University of California system, which are test blind. They don't consider test scores at all in being admitted, but test scores will allow you to get out of certain requirements after you're admitted.
Got it.
And I know that makes probably no sense, but that's.
Well, I think it makes varying sense to people at different times in the process. Last year when I had 10th grader, this would have been gobbledygook, but now that I have an 11th grader, I'm starting to plug in a little bit more. And I think to the 12th grader parents, it's really speaking their language. So I think, you know, there's a time to plug into these questions. I think this is also a good point to stop and talk about Naviance.
Oh, Naviance.
Oh, Naviance, I know. But just to share with the uninitiated, Naviance is software that takes data about your student, and I should let you explain this, Nancy. I'll just keep going since I started. It takes data from your student, test scores, GPA, and creates a scattergram essentially of colleges based on the data that they provide and make public, and will tell you your child has a good chance of getting into this school, and this is how your student compares to the students in your area and your school.
They tell you it actually just only tells you about how you compare to other BCC students who've applied to that school. But you can also see the numbers for the national numbers as well.
Okay, so just national and school.
Yes.
So it'll give you a sense of if a school is completely unrealistic, if it's a reach, if it's solidly in, you know, achievable territory, or if maybe your student might be able to apply to a school with a higher selectivity rate. It'll give you just kind of a general sense. There's a lot of, I don't know, I feel like mixed opinions about the accuracy of Naviance. It's only looking at data. It's an algorithm, which the admissions process is not. So I don't know.
Naviance is also,
caveats.
so yes, to that, Naviance is only as good as the information that they get from students. So for example, not everyone fills out the survey that tells you fully which schools they applied to, got deferred, got rejected, were accepted. So that data is not complete. The students have to tell the admissions, the Kate Heald, that they got into a school, but they don't have to do their full list. So we don't always have all the information for the school, but what is super helpful is sometimes you can see, especially when you're looking at it as a 10th grader or 11th grader, like, oh, at this school, if I bump up my test score by 50, that makes a huge difference of getting in. Or if I get my GPA up by 0.3, that's a difference maker. So I think it does help in seeing what you need to do for some schools if a school really is your top choice.
That's great. Okay. And everyone has a Naviance account created for them at school. So you could check in with your student and ask them, and you can log into Naviance together and take a look around.
And parents also have access to Naviance at any time.
Great.
Naviance is also the vehicle, the platform by which students request their letters of recommendation, and one of the vehicles for which they request transcripts. So it's incredibly critical senior year that your student pays attention to Naviance. It is also how they request, where they see when college visits are coming, which are another key component of this process.
All right, so now we're into junior year, the winter, so we can continue prepping for standardized tests, taking the SAT or the ACT for the first time, maybe get a little taste if they're feeling good, or if they've just completed a prep course, that can be a good time to do it. And then again, use these resources. I know we have some college counselors in the area who've been on this before, who really swear by the FISC guide. There's again, Supermatch and Big Future can help winnow those lists. One interesting thing that came out of a student panel we had last year, I know I've repeated this, or some of you have heard us before, but they, again, the pandemic did change things, and some things I think for the better. Schools really up to their games in terms of virtual tours. The Instagram videos that students are making are really incredible. You can go on a tour of a campus with a student. And obviously these are marketing tools, but you can get a sense of what the campus looks like through a lot of these online virtual experiences. And some students we talked to last spring talked about how they just spent hours really getting a feel for a lot of different schools that way. So that's another way students can do it. In addition, of course, to visiting college campuses. I know Nancy said don't leave it until spring break of your junior year. You know, if you have a business trip and you can bring your kid along, if you are going to a soccer tournament, I'm drawing from my personal experience right now, if you have a soccer tournament in another city, you could try to hit a college, and it might not be a college that your kid wants to go to necessarily. I don't know, Nancy, I'm curious what you think about this. My thought was just get a feel for what a tour is and how to evaluate a campus.
Exactly, boots on the ground. So, you know, we have kids, right, who say like, I get 92% of my kids are like, I want a school that's bigger than my high school. I want a school that has rah-rah sports. And then they go to a big school that has football on national television, and they go there on a game day and they're like, 80,000 people is a lot of people. I don't know that I want to be with 80,000 people. And they just see those things that they saw on TV that they thought college was, they see that that's not it. And some of them go and they're like, that's exactly what I want. I want to try to get on TV. I want to do those things. So once they go, they start seeing things. Also, a child may think that they don't want a school that has religion, right, of any kind. And then they go and they're like, oh, but they have small classes and they have this thing and that thing and they like it. So they just need to go and they start to see what they like and they don't like. They start to say, oh, when I said city, I didn't mean a city. I actually meant a suburb of a city. Like, I don't want to be in a city. Like, and when they say they want to be out, they like, oh no, I don't want to be that far out. And they just start to figure those things out, right? And it's just important for them to help to whittle down those things. And the other thing about visiting colleges, which is, I think, not on the slides, is that some schools track what's called demonstrated interest. And demonstrated interest, some schools use to determine whether or not you really want to go to that school or not. And demonstrated interest can be achieved by registering for virtual tours, registering for, a lot of schools have things where they're like, meet the engineers, meet the artist. So students in different schools, different colleges will talk to you about their experience as being an artist at that school, as being an engineer. And those things also count. Following on Instagram or TikTok also counts as demonstrated interest. And I've seen it happen where it's made a difference. Two kids have the exact same profile, and one student did a bunch of things with the school and the other student didn't, and the student who did the things got in. And so it's just another way to track for the schools to track whether or not you really want to go there, because schools really want to protect their yield. So they want to admit a certain number of people. And so they want to be sure that the people they are letting in will actually come.
Yeah.
I would add one other thing to that. I think that the school visits is very important. And when you step foot on a campus, you get a vibe very quickly. And we hear over and over from college counselors that the vibe check is very important when a student is determining what schools to put on their list. Another wonderful resource, because visiting schools can become expensive, is BCC's college counseling department invites schools to come to BCC every week through the fall. There's about, I would say, anywhere between 5 and 10 schools who visit BCC. Most of them are in person. There's a list on the college counseling website, and you can get some sort of a vibe about different schools from their presentation. Their in-person presentations are very strong. So if you certainly can't get on campus to every school your child might be interested in, that's another way to connect with them and get a sense of who they are.
Piggybacking on that, Tina, Kate Heald also has a list of students, BCC graduates at various schools, who are willing to talk to your student about their experience being at schools. It's a super great resource. So, you can also reach out to her to get that information if you want to, you want to check out McAllister or schools that, you might not have heard about, but we have students at, and they will talk to you and tell you, like, here's how the transition was coming from the East Coast to the Midwest. Here's what happened. Here's what I love about the school. Here's what I don't. And it's really great intel.
Great, so we had a lot of questions about Naviance, and thank you, Lyric, for posting that link and some information about Naviance. I did want to say some information that we've collected is that in terms of using Naviance to help be a piece of building your list, that you do want to have a variety of schools, probables, match schools, and reaches. And then that list can be dynamic. It might change. Kids change so much within the course of a school year. Their interests, their desires, their knowledge of themselves and how they thrive and how they study and what they're looking for changes a great deal. So again, think about that as a dynamic thing. All right, so now we're to the junior year, spring. So again, visit college campuses as you can, as you're able. There are lots of virtual options. Continue to refine the list. We're continuing to take the standardized tests that we've previewed in other slides. And now is a great time to set up a meeting with the College Counseling Office with Kate Heald and to talk about what you're thinking post-high school. We're having a gap year information session later this year. There are lots of options. An increasing option is to attend community college and then transfer to a four-year institution. There are gap years. There are the huge variety of colleges. So just make sure you're using all your resources. And Kate Heald is one of many, and an excellent resource there. Excuse me. You're going to want to request teacher letters of recommendation. And again, if Kate were here, I am so sorry. I'm not going to take a sip of water. She would recommend talking to those teachers in person. Hopefully 11th grade, your student has a little bit more confidence as a student is able to build some relationships with teachers. And those teachers are whom they should reach out to. Ideally, there are 2 core subject matter teachers. Talk to them in person. And by talk to them in person, I mean your child should talk to them in person and ask them, and then provide at least 3 weeks notice via Naviance with the official request.
So I'm going to jump in here. This is the weird thing about Naviance. It is true that you request them in the spring. You also have to request it again in senior year for it to match up and go to Common App. It's just a function of how the system works. you have to do 2 requests. You have to do one in junior year and one in senior year.
I'd like to add on. I'd like to add on here as well. We can't emphasize enough the importance of your student talking to teachers in the early spring of junior year about recommendations. There are some teachers who just can't write as many recommendation letters as they're asked to do, and so they cap it. And your student may go to them a little too late, and they say, "I'm so sorry, you can't." And with the need to get 2 core subject teachers, and that does not include language. So we're talking math, science, English, social studies. They need to find 2 of them. So it's really not too early. Once you hit early spring of junior year, have your student approach a teacher and just get their name on the radar so that they don't get boxed out. It's just a reality for these junior year teachers who have a big workload.
And that's absolutely the case for some of the IB teachers. I will say, having had 2 kids through IB, they say no at a certain number, and it doesn't matter. You could be their favorite student, but if you ask them too late, they're not going to do it.
All right, those are some money-making tips. Thank you. Also, request the school counselor letter of recommendation. This is a really nice questionnaire that gets the students thinking about themselves and really gets them into application writing mode. And from what I've seen of this reference, it will ask them lots of questions that they'll then have to answer on the Common App and other applications. And it will help the counselor write a wonderful letter of recommendation as well. So this is a place, Nancy, fill in here, but this is a place to really sing your own praises, toot your own horn, and help the counselor represent things about you that she might not know.
Exactly. And because we've had so many schools go to test optional, they are relying, a lot of admissions officers have told me they're relying more on the counselor letter of recommendation than in the past, because it's the person who, in theory, has some contact with the student and knows the student. And so that's what the colleges are relying on to figure out what the student is about, how the student, what makes the student works, how will the student fit into their college. And the parent survey is another piece of that, which so many parents at BCC do not do. And it just gives the counselors real things about your students that they wouldn't know otherwise, right? Like, and I was speaking before about whether they were taking care of Nana, like the counselor may not know that. And if you tell them, then they will include that in their accounts. They would lift things literally from your survey and put it in their letter. And so you just give them more data to make your student have a richer, more complete profile.
Nancy, this is a question from me.
Okay.
I feel like, and maybe I'm a victim of too much information at this point, but I feel like I hear all these statistics like admissions officers will spend 8 to 12 minutes maximum on each application. You know, you hear these just incredible statistics, but then we're hearing more and more, not just from you, but from others, that those letters are really important, that all this information really is taken into consideration. Can you help us square that circle? I don't know, it just feels contradictory.
So a lot of the readers go through intense training, and basically they learn to look and like scan and like, you know, they're looking for the highlights, right? They're looking at things very quickly, but they're looking for certain things. And they are taking they don't. But what happens is that what you want it to be is that when they first look at your application, there's so much there that they want to look at it again. And that's really what you're trying to get to, is that you get to that second pile. Because the first pile is pretty short when they look at it. The second pile, they look longer, and there's more people looking at it. So that gives you another advantage. So you just keep wanting to have it so they want to keep looking at you.
Got it.
And that's why you need a richer picture, right? You need the richer document, not the he was the best student I've ever had. And there's nothing after that. That's a throwaway. They put it in the reject pile. But it doesn't say, but if they have an example of you being great, an example of you doing something of, you know, this student, every time a new student came to class, they were the one that helped acclimate them to the class. They gave them special tutoring so that it could catch up. Those are the things they pay attention to, and then you get pushed to the next pile. That's my kind of cynical take on it.
No, it's helpful. Definitely helpful. Thank you. So again, some other things to do in the summer after junior year. Nancy just talked about the parent reflection. I'm surprised to learn a lot of people don't do it, but apparently that's true.
And also, just to jump in, the reason why I think some parents don't do it is because it's not in the parent Naviance account. The parent reflection is in the student's Naviance account. So you have to do it, give it to your student to upload from their account. I think that's why some parents don't do it, because it's not under their Naviance, so they don't see it. So they're like, why would I do it? And the kids are only paying attention to what the kid has to do, so they don't tell their parents, so they don't do it.
Got it. Thank you. And so some of these other things are things, this is like a slide of things you can do with your kid. Here you finally have a role, parents, right? You can complete the parent reflection. You can be thinking about the financial aid plan, helping your student think about that. There are these financial aid calculators that we've linked to here. And again, we're going to share these slides. There are scholarships available. You can start looking around for those. And then also something you could help your student do is prepare for interviews if they end up doing those. Have a mock interview. Invite a friend over and have them talk to your student. Different ways of helping them prepare for those moments. Other summer things after the junior year, make a spreadsheet or a checklist where you have determined these application deadlines, and you can have it all in different tabs. You can have stages of the application process. You can have you know, your list that you're winnowing and changing and refining, but all of those come with different supplemental writing tasks. So make sure that your student is going into the Common App and looking at those. They come, you know, different, the UC system has its own application. So you would need to look at what's entailed there. And so you can just create some kind of master checklist, spreadsheet, table, some kind of thing that will help you keep track of all of this at a glance. Students should be updating the resume. And then over the summer, there's no reason not to start that essay. Get one Common App essay out of the gate. There are so many free resources offered by BCC virtually over the summer, and I think maybe in person again. So please just keep your eye on the email because a lot comes through. So really be aware of what's offered there. And then you can go ahead and start the Common Application and the Coalition app. It's a less populous sort of Common App, but it still is accepted by 137 colleges, I think, at last count. So if the college you're applying to accepts that, that might be something that you want to do, and you can go ahead and start those ahead of time. I'm just going to keep moving here because then once you get to senior year fall, this is where the rubber meets the road. And these are some key things that you need to do. I think Tina has the link to requesting official transcripts that she can drop in the chat. Give permission for the release of the transcript. These are two distinct steps. I remember this was a big question last year, Nancy. You have to give permission to release the transcript, which is a Google form, and then you have to request your official transcripts to be sent to schools through Naviance.
And then you have to meet Miss Bonner in person. That's the third step.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to meet Miss Bonner in person, who goes over your list and clarifies everything.
Because they want to make sure they get that right.
They want to get it right. They track the deadlines. When's your first date that you need? How are you sending it? For example, are you playing early action, early decision, regular decision, priority, international student? There's a bunch of deadlines, and they want to make sure they have everything right.
And then you're going to want to complete the FAFSA, which opens October 1st. That's coming up. Different colleges and universities have different deadlines. So again, that's where the spreadsheet comes in handy. You can be combing their websites and bringing all that information into one place for yourself. And what we've heard is best to complete it by November 15th.
Right, and I will say, in this area, a lot of people believe, no, they won't get any financial aid, and so they don't want to fill out the FAFSA, but there are a ton of schools that say, if you never did the FAFSA your first year, you can't apply for aid subsequent years. So if the pandemic taught us anything, many people's finances changed. So just complete it, have it on record. Yes, you might not get any money, but you want it, if your situation changes, if you had something in the books for the schools, then they will consider any changes to it. But if you've never had anything in the system, schools won't consider it. And that doesn't seem fair, I know, but that's how it is. And I mean, we leave the house when my husband fills out the FAFSA because there's lots of bad language that happens, and it's a little bit frustrating. But you know, you do it, you get it done, and once you've done it once, you know what to do, and it gets easier. So I really encourage you to fill it out.
Everyone should fill out the FAFSA. We did get a question about what the FAFSA is. It's a federal application form for financial student assistance, assessing need based on the college's tuition that eventually they will receive acceptances to.
And it's necessary for all public US universities, as well as some overseas universities, also some Canadian and European universities will also give you aid based on the FAFSA. There's another thing which is not on here, which is the CSS, which is a more deep dive into your finances that some private schools request.
Ron Klein, again, the guy he's a reporter who wrote a book that's just out called The Price of College. And he talks a lot about the CSS. So again, another plug to listen to that podcast episode. Or Google Ron Klein, The Price of College. He's done reporting for years. And then here is a link to a FAFSA instructional video that can give you a sense of what it is and what is entailed there. Just share that with everyone. I know we are out of time, and luckily we are at our resource slide here, where we have all of these resources we've mentioned throughout the evening. So those are linked, and you'll be able to click on those links. And then I've also shared some college counseling and test prep options here. The only college counselors I've really included here are college counselors like Nancy, who is a parent, who is near and dear, and we know them well. College Bound is Jody Siegel, who is also a former BCC parent and has been very generous with her time and expertise on behalf of our community, as has College Wise. They've donated a lot of time and free resources to us. But there are a ton out there. Capital Educators and Prep Matters are the two vendors that help us do the mock testing in November and December. They're longtime DC sort of institutions at this point. And Top Score Education and the College Coaches are the two folks who will be joining us on Thursday for how to narrate your experience and build that resume for application. So it really will help students get in the mindset of how to talk about what they've done and what they're interested in. So we really appreciate everybody's attendance tonight. Like I've said multiple times, this is recorded. We will share the recording promptly, and we will share these slides. Nancy Edwards, again, she's in our community. She is here to answer questions and helpful to all of us. So thank you, Nancy, so much for your time and expertise. Thank you for letting me badger you into doing this. We appreciate you so much. This was incredibly helpful. And thanks to all of you for the nice notes that are coming in. We appreciate you coming, and we do this for the whole community. So again, it's made better by your questions. Hope everyone has a great evening. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording at this point. If you have any questions, we can hang out for a couple of minutes, or you
Absolutely.
can Or
Yeah.
you can email, yeah, okay, great, thanks Nancy. Nancy can hang out for a few minutes, and you can also email us at this email address with any other questions. So I hope you all have a good night. I am going to stop sharing my screen after I stop recording. No, trying to stop recording. Here we go.